Spirit. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. So, good morning to everyone. How are you today? You're fine. How are you? To those who are our viewers, how are you today? I hope you are fine. And you are always in tune with us in these course. And I hope that our class discussion is very memorable and very enriching, particularly when it comes to our perspective of our society, perspective also of our own life, perspective of our way of relating with one another, particularly in the wider society. That is to say that we do not separate ourselves in the bigger picture of things. As much as possible, we want to situate our own individuality in the bigger picture of reality. And I think Plato is very insightful, and he is the one who is very enlightening when it comes to that kind of insight, because he is trying to situate the individual in the society, and he is not a type of person who would isolate the human person away from human society. He is always, or the human person, he is always in the midst of a community. He is not a lone wolf, in other words. The human person is not a lone wolf, but rather the human person, as much as possible, when we are reading the Republic, the human person is always situated in a society, in a community, in which every individual is participating in the forging of that society. That society is not yet perfect, it's not yet given, in other words. And the human individual is participating in the building or in the forging of that just society. And I think that is very relevant to us also. It is relevant in a sense that Plato wants us to realize that our society is not something that is falling from heaven. Our community is not something that comes from heaven and it is being presented to us, already made, already forged. No, rather, Plato is trying to say to us that our society actually is something that we build, something that we forge. And we, as members of that society, want to participate in the forging and in the building of that community or society. And that is why for him it is so important that we can be able to discover our own aptitude, our own inclinations, our own capacity, so that we can be able to respond to the needs of every member in the society in accordance with the kind of ability, with the kind of aptitude that we have discovered, whether it is becoming a guardian, for example, of a city, because to be a guardian also is something that you discover. It is something that you discover. To become an auxiliary, for example, or to become a helper, that is to say, to become an enforcer, to become an agent of the system, to become a policeman, for example, because these are the auxiliaries in Plato's Republic. The policeman, the army, the soldiers, in other words, these were the auxiliaries of the guardians, or of the guardian. So we are the helpers who wanted to maintain the integrity of the society, that it shall not be corrupted, either internally or either externally. Because for Plato, when you are constructing a city, when you are creating a city, then you also must be ready for war. You must be willing and you must be prepared for war, particularly if you are creating a city, or if you are trying to protect a family, or if you are trying to protect a kind of chapel that you want. As much as possible, you want to protect the integrity of the community from external threats or from external attack or assaults. And if you are living in a city, make sure that you are always prepared for war. Always prepared for war. I do not know if you recall the line in the movie Thor. That's the first movie. And King Odin said to Thor that a wise king is never seeks out war. Did you remember that line? A wise king never seeks out war, but he is always ready for it. That is to say that a wise king must always be prepared. That is to say, his auxiliaries also must always be prepared for war, because it is your duty to defend the city that you have created, the city that you have forged. It is because it is yours. It is part of you already. It is part of your identity. It is the source of who you are. It is the source of your well-being. It is the source of your living. The city is part already of you, and so you must be ready to defend the city when it is necessary. And at the same time, you have also to be prepared to defend the city against internal conflict. Internal conflict. And Plato would call it faction. When there is faction within the community itself, as much as possible, you must be ready also to face every kind of internal conflict. And as much as possible, you know how to handle it, so that the conflict will not last. The conflict will not endure. And as much as possible, the faction will not happen. But still, there is always this unity within the community. The faction, when there is a faction, there is also the threat that it shall be disintegrated. Because the faction arises because of different opinion or different perspective. And as much as possible, the different opinion must be settled. The faction should not be, the motivation of the faction should not be that of self-interest. The faction should not be coming from your desire to be the guardian of the city, despite the fact that you are not fit to rule the city. So in other words, as much as possible, you must, or the guardians, or as a member of the city, you must be able to preserve the integrity of the city from either external assaults, from foreign forces, for example. If China will invade us, because China is an external assault, an external power. If China will try to invade us, as much as possible, we are also prepared to protect our own land, to protect our own soil. But then if we are fat, if we are sluggish, if we are very slow, we can easily be defeated by the Kung Fu master. I'm just joking. I'm just joking. We can easily be defeated by the Kung Fu masters, like the Kung Fu Panda. Or we can easily be defeated with the tiger claw. the tiger style of Kung Fu. I don't know what kind of Kung Fu is that. The tiger, and you have also the mantis, you have also the crane, you have also the monkey, and the snake. The 5 Kung Fu masters. So we can easily be defeated by them, by these masters, because they are ready for war, prepared for war. But we are not so unprepared, and so we can easily be subjugated. We can easily be subdued. We can easily be conquered without any fight from foreign invasion. But of course, I hope that our leaders, for example, General Lorizana is already asserting something, that it is our sovereignty. And I think that is a serious conviction. It is because they are our auxiliaries, the auxiliaries of the city. And the president also must be able to uphold the sovereignty of the country because he is the first citizen. The president is the first citizen of the country. He is the first citizen of the country. And as a first citizen, it is his responsibility and obligation to uphold our own sovereignty. And I think it is just right and proper that the ICC should not interfere in the internal affairs of our own justice system. It is because our justice system is still very functional. Why should the ICC would intervene into our own justice system as if we are not sovereign anymore? That is to say that we are not capable of handling our own business. Justice, according to Plato, is minding one's own business. So if the Philippines can be able to mind our own business still, so we have the capacity to do our own thing, our justice system is still very functional, our president is still psychologically sane and mentally capable of handling his duty, then the international institution should not intervene into our own domestic affairs. It is because it is like your own home. You do not want that your neighbors will intervene into your own household. Huwag ka nang makialam dito sa amin. May sarili ka namang pamamahay. Pakialaman mo sa iyong sariling bahay. And we want as much as possible to maintain the integrity of our own home. So do not intervene. You will only intervene when our home is already dysfunctional. That is the time when you can intervene already. You can help us. But as long as we have still the capacity to handle our own business, so give us that chance. Do that as a kind of justice to us. Because according to Plato, justice is minding our own business. Minding your own business. Do your own business. So, the last time we mentioned also that the just society in Plato's Republic is founded, or it rested on a mythical foundation. And he calls it a noble life. That's the very foundation of the just society, which Plato elaborated in his book. It is the noble life. And it is noble because it calls something noble in the citizens of his city. It is very noble. It is because it is a myth that aspires or strives for unity among the members of the city. Because Plato, as much as possible, would want to inculcate that all of the citizens in the city are brothers and sisters. They are equal, in other words. Brothers and sisters. They are united by common virtues, by common goals. And what are the virtues which Plato elaborated or expressed in a well-ordered society? The virtues are wisdom, courage, moderation, and justice. These are the four virtues which Plato discussed in a well-ordered. These are the characteristics of a well-ordered society, not a chaotic society. Because when you say that there is chaos in a society, it is either because it is immoderate, or either it is because it lacks wisdom, or either it lacks courage. That is to say, the society does not preserve the common values of the society itself. It has different kinds of values. It has different kinds of values. One person has another value, another person has another value, the other persons also have another values. And because of it, there is faction. When you have different values, then there is necessarily faction within the community or within the society because they think differently. Unlike when a community shares the common values such as love, for example. Love, justice, compassion. So they are thinking in the same line. They are thinking in the same wavelength. And because they share common values, then as much as possible, each one must uphold it. Each one must be courageous enough to preserve the opinion of the city. Because that's the opinion of the members of the city. That is to say, it is the opinion of the city itself. Because it is the value that preserve the city, not to be disintegrated, not to be disjoined by any internal conflict or internal faction. So these are the values that characterize the well-ordered society in Plato's Republic. And so we come to the point wherein Plato would now say that in a well-ordered society, those who should govern should be the ones who are fitting to rule. They fit to rule because they have been tested that they have the capacity to rule. They have the capacity to govern the city. And he would allot that role to the philosophers. The philosophers actually are known to be lovers of knowledge and wisdom. So as much as possible, the ruler of the city, or the guardian of the city, must be lovers of knowledge and of wisdom. They must not be lovers of money. That is the danger. When your ruler is a lover of money, then there is always the big possibility that that society will also collapse. It will be destroyed because the ruler can easily be swayed by monetary interest. Magkano ka ba? 5 million. Bigay ka na ng 5 million and you are going to break or you are going to reinterpret once again the law. So the guardian of the city, according to Plato, must not be a lover of money. Neither must he also a lover of honor. He must not be the lover of honor also. But rather, he must be a philosopher. That is to say that he loves knowledge more than anything else. He is a lover of wisdom. And it is in 367 that Plato, kindly, if you have the book with you, kindly open it in 367. 367b. I don't know. I think is this the one? 300. Where did I put it? No, I already forgot. But it is being said there that I really wish to read it to you. It is there in that particular passage when he said that the lovers of knowledge must be the ruler because they have gentle disposition. They have gentle disposition. And so Plato would say that the guardians must be trained, must be educated, not only with gymnastics but with music first and foremost, because these are the precognitive or the preparatory studies, the music and the gymnastics. But first of all, we must study music. It is because it is a preparatory study so that you are going to have a gentle soul. Because a lover of learning, a lover of wisdom has a gentle soul. Rather than when you prefer so much about gymnastics, about muscle building, about being strong and muscular, then you become like a dog that harms everybody. Because Plato wanted his guardians to be like a trained dog. You are like a wolf, in other words. If you do not have any study of philosophy or of learning or of knowledge, then you become like a wolf which devours everyone that it can see. But Plato would, as much as possible, want his guardians that they are like trained dogs, that they can recognize their owner, but at the same time, they can also recognize enemies. That they are good to their friends, and at the same time, they are very cautious to foreigners. Just like dogs. Kaya yung aso, pag nakita niya ng hindi may-ari ng bahay siya ay tumatahol. But then, to those who are owner, he is very gentle. And so, it is in that aspect also that we can see that actually Plato is not debunking the idea of Simonides when he says that justice is doing good to your friends and harming your enemies, provided that that principle is situated in the bigger picture of society. Anybody who would harm the city is your enemy because it is your home. Anybody who is going to attack the city is your enemy. And so you need to protect the city. So your enemies, therefore, are those who want to destroy your own city. So anybody, even within the members of the society itself, who are having a different kind of thinking than you, who are trying to destroy internally the city, then you can also consider them as your enemies because they want to destroy your own city. Just like the drug lords or the drug addicts. Drug lords, they are your enemies because they want to destroy your city. They want to destroy your community. They want to destroy your family. And so, you must be able also to protect your own home. Send the drug lords to the prison. Send the drug lords to prison. Because they are your enemies. In the same way, when there are an external attack or external threat, they are your enemies. So Plato would now acknowledge Simonides' definition that justice is doing good to your friends and harming your enemies. harming your enemies, particularly when you are going to situate that maxim in the bigger picture of society. Because you want to preserve the integrity of the city. It is your home, it is your mother, and so the city, as much as possible, must be intact. So that is the point of Plato, why leaders should be lovers of wisdom, so that they can be able to address the real issue of society. They can be able to address the real issue of society. If the members of society are doing their responsibility, if they are doing their obligation, so you have to treat them well. Treat them well. If they are good farmers, if they are good carpenters, they are good lawyers, they are good taxpayers, they are good nurses, they are good cook, they are good craftsmen, in other words, all kinds of professions. If they are performing their city, then treat them well. Provide the opportunity for them so that they can be able to perform their calling, to perform their own obligation to the city. So as much as possible, you must be able to provide opportunity where a carpenter can be able to serve the city. You must provide the engineers projects, particularly if the engineers are doing their job perfectly well. That is to say, they do not cheat. But if they cheat, consider them as your enemies. Because the engineer were trying to build substandard buildings, just like those houses, bank houses in Tacloban, the Yolanda hit places. The engineers there receive kickback. And if you are a good guardian, you must be able to treat them as if they are your enemies. Put them to jail. Because they are destroying the city. They are destroying the city. Put them to jail. Give justice to the members of the society who are doing their own responsibility, who are honest, who are noble in their own profession. You give them justice. You give justice to the carpenter who are working the bank houses. Ang kanilang sweldo, 350 lang. Pero yung mga engineers na kickback nila, milyones. Where is the justice there? It is injustice. So if you are a good guardian, you must be able to give justice to the workers who are working in that village, to the carpenters, to the, what do you call this, to the lineman, to the water engineer, for example, or to the electrician, to the lumber, what do you call this, to the yung magtutroso, the lumberman, I don't know, yung magtutroso, because they cut a lot of coconut lumber, but then what they receive, very small portion. It was only 350, a minimum wage, 350. But then the engineers, those who are holding great power, they receive great kickbacks. So where is justice there? They are cheating. They are cheating. They are not true to their profession. And so, justice has not been served to those who are working on the ground. To those who are working on the ground. And it is in this kind of understanding where we can resonate very well when Trasimako said that in the real world, in our own world, justice is the advantage of the stronger. That is actually a very nice description, very appropriate description. And so Plato would now say in book 6 and book 6 particularly, that in an unjust society, philosophers are useless. In an unjust society, philosophers are useless. Because in an unjust society, it is not regulated and governed by knowledge, but always of self-interest, always of love of money. It is not love of wisdom that is the governing power of that society. And so, if you have a society which is not just, it is because it is unwise. People there does not love. People there do not love knowledge or wisdom. What they love actually is money making. Pera-pera lang ang kanilang hanap sa buhay. So kung pera-pera lang ang hanap mo sa buhay, philosophers are truly useless. Because that is now the objection of Plato. In book 6, Plato would now object to Plato, to Socrates. Now it's because Socrates is the mouthpiece of, it is Plato's thinking which is being put in the mouth of Socrates. So in an unjust society, philosophers are useless. Sapagkat, what matters most in an unjust society is pera-pera lang. Pera-pera lang naman tayo dito eh. We do not really care about our own society. Ang gusto lang natin ay kumita. In the same way also, with those who have power, and that is their sole motivation why they are there. It is simply because you can always take advantage of your own position. Because Casimagus would say that justice is always the advantage of the stronger. When you are there in position, so take advantage of it. Magpayaman ka na. Take advantage of it. Magpayaman ka na. It's because it's the only opportunity that you have. Wala ka nang bubulitin. And so Plato is very true and authentic in his own description. So is Plato an idealist or a realist? That's the question. It is because when you see a problem, do you really want that problem to simply go on? Or you really, as much as possible, want also to give your own solution? So the issue, therefore, is not about being an idealist or being a realist. The issue, therefore, is what is the right thing that we should do. It is something ethical by nature already. It is no longer in the domain of epistemology, but now the question is in the domain of ethics. Because when you say you are an idealist, that's a question of epistemology. Because for you, knowledge is nothing but a creation of the mind, a construct of the mind. But when you say realist, you are a realist, then you only describe what you see. Because realism, according to the definition of Aristotle, is the conformity of the mind to things. So the mind, therefore, is a tool that discovers something. The mind, it is the conformity of the mind to things. Or in the language of St. Thomas Aquinas, it is because Thomas Aquinas would follow that kind of definition of knowledge. Knowledge is the conformity of the mind to things. And so the mind is descriptive. It describes what you see. That is what you call realism. The mind describes what it sees. And so in Latin, it is what you call adequatio intellectum ad re, or the conformity of the mind to things. It's a good thing that you should remember this thing. This is what you call realism. Adequatio intellectum. Why intellectum? intellectus. It's because that's the accusative form. If you recall already what is your Latin? Your Latin, the direct object must always be in the accusative form. So this adequatio intellectum. Adequatio intellectum ad re. Re means things, or res, rei, rem, re. It is in the ablative form because you have the preposition ad.
What's an intellectual parts?
Huh? No, intellectum is a noun in the accusative form. Adequatio, conformity, the conformity of the mind to things. The conformity of the mind. Adequatio intellectum ad re. Or it is also being translated as the adequation of the intellect to things. The adequation. But actually, you can translate it in this manner. The conformity of the things. The conformity of the mind to things. Adequatio intellectum ad re. That is what you call realism. And so the mind discovers something. It discovers. Just like, for example, you describe what you see. There is green leaves, green grass, big trees out there. It is gloomy. The sun is not around. So the mind describes what is reality. It is not a construction of your own mind. In other words, you see actually what is out there. Because idealism would say that no, everything that you see actually are just mental construction. Everything is mental construction. What is true is what is in your mind. What is true is what is in your mind. So that is what you call idealism. We do not see things as they are, but we only see the images that the mind wants us to see. Or that is what you call, it is also called the sense data theory. The sense datum. Actually, we do not see things as they are. What we see is the sense data, or the sense datum, which is being presented to the mind. So that is what you call the idealist position. So Plato now, the question for Plato is not about idealism or realism. But here the question is ethical by nature. What should we do if the society that we are describing is not the society that we want to live? Are we just go on describing it? Or do we want to propose something as a solution? So when you want to propose something, then the question therefore is no longer on the epistemological level, but here it is already being brought into the ethical dimension. And so for Plato, philosophy is never compartmentalized. That's what I've mentioned. Philosophy is never compartmentalized. It is not, this is ethics, this is ontology, this is morality, this is religion, which is actually the very character of our philosophical discipline. You have philosophy of religion there. We have here philosophy of knowledge, of epistemology. We have here metaphysics, compartmentalized. But for Plato, the philosophical disciplines are not compartmentalized because they are so much relevant to the human person. They affect the different aspects of the human persons. And so the questions of ethics is completely connected with politics. And the question of politics is completely related to your religious life. So you cannot compartmentalize because your life cannot be compartmentalized. So everything must be seen in a global perspective. Global perspective. And it is also for the reason that it is not everyone's calling to study philosophy. So it is in this aspect that Plato now wants us to realize that not everyone are born to be philosophers. And how are you going to strain o paano mo salangin ang tao? That's the And so Plato proposed a pedagogy of education. So here, philosophy of education is completely connected with ethics because it is his way of responding, it is his way of giving a solution to an unjust society by means of education, by means of the education of the young. That is to say, by means of the paideia, or the education of the young. Paideia means education of the young. Paideia. I think that's the paideia. Paideia. I think that's the, I'm not really, there is an I there. Paidios means a child, but it is not an ordinary child, but a child that is docile and ductile. Or how do we pronounce docile? Docile. That's how you pronounce it. What do you call this? How do we pronounce docile? Docile or docile? Huh? Docile or docile? How do you pronounce it in your... It's because according to your vocabulary. Docile? 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 Ano, it was your vocabulary. Huh? Docile. Oh, sorry, Christopher Demanda. So the manner in which we are going to pronounce this word, docile. Okay. So paideia actually means a docile and a ductile. Ductile means it can be educated. Very open for education. A docile, because the moment I will see, I will read it in the English side. Anyway, that's the right way of reading it. So, as much as possible, the paideia is a docile, and that is why, English, we have a joke in Argentina. And our formator would say this joke, and he said, of course he's a Spaniard, and he's very proud of Spanish language, and he would say, French is the language of lovers, and rightly so. It is the language of lovers, romantic. French is the language of lovers. English is a language of a child, but Spanish is the language of the gods. So that's how he would say it. It is because in English, it is very hard to read, particularly if you're not familiar so much with the language. It is different with Spanish. It's because you read as you see it. You read according to its own syllables. In Tagalog, kung ano ang baybay, siya ang bigkas. Kung ano ang baybay, siya ang basa. Kung ano ang bigkas, siya ang baybay. So it's very easy. The moment you read it, the moment you know the syllable, that's how you should read it. But it is different in English because there are a lot of exemptions. There are a lot of exceptions. Just for example, this word, docile. Because the moment you see it, do. You should always do. You should always read it as do, not the. Because the syllable comes from do. Do plus. So docile. But it is not da. It is do. Docile. in the same way as, how do you pronounce it? Domicile or domicile? What is the meaning of domicile? Or domicile or domicile? What does that mean? Domicile. It's your home. No, it's your home. It comes from the Latin word domos. In your Latin word, domos, meaning your home. Your home, domos. So domicile, therefore, is your residence. So if you are going to use that in English and you have a girlfriend, where is your domicile? What do you mean domicile? Are you speaking in Thai? I don't understand what you are saying. But actually, what you are asking is your residence. Where is your home? But then you just want to be so smart. You have a different kind of vocabulary. Where is your domicile? Oh, wow. Domicile. Domicile. I don't know yet. Domicile or domicile? Because here, dasi. But anyway, it's a way of, at least you know already. Dasi. So anyway, we continue. So for Plato, how are we going to train people so that they can be able to discover their aptitude? Because that is the program, that is the solution that Plato would now give. It's a theory of education. And so the theory of education, philosophy of education, is completely connected with ethics. And it is also connected with social philosophy. It is connected with social philosophy. Philosophy of education, social philosophy, ethics, these are completely related to one another. And so for Plato, he sees them as if they are a unified whole. He sees them in an overview. He sees them as an overview, in an overview. That is the bigger picture that he sees. And so, in order for him not just to describe what is out there, he wanted to propose a solution. So it is not just a question of epistemology. It is not a question of knowledge. It is also a question of philosophy of education, because you are now going to address a social problem. Because for him, the philosophers should be, but then in an unjust society, the philosophers are useless. The philosophers are useless in an unjust society. So, what kind of society do we have? Unjust, because all of us are useless. Therefore, we are useless. Do you agree with that? Or maybe you can, you can make a comment, you can write something about, It is because we are not just philosophers, we are also religious leaders. We are also religious leaders, and in our own religious domain, we provide enlightenment to people. That is why, as much as possible, we must cultivate our own mind, our own intellect, so that we can bring of enlightenment to others.
Why is it that some philosophers are dubbed as atheists or atheists?
No, they are atheists. It is because for them, God is not essential in their own thinking, in their own philosophical theory. In their own philosophical theory, God isn't essential. God isn't important. In other words, that his philosophical theory can stand without God as part of it. But for us, it is not the case. It is not the case, because God is always at the center. God is always at the center. Because when we are going to proclaim Christ's message of the gospel, what we are proclaiming actually is God's graciousness, God's presence. And that is something that we proclaim. And so as much as possible, we have to cultivate our own mind so that we can go back to the cave. Because studying is like getting out of the cave. And when we are outside already, as much as possible, we must have the desire to go back into the cave. So that we can also invite others, so that in other words, we can be agents of enlightenment to people. That we can enlighten them so that they too can be able to get out of their own cave. So that is so important, that we have to cultivate our own mind. Yes. So okay. So we go back to Plato's idea that it is a philosophy of education that he is trying to propose in order to give solution to an unjust society. Because in an unjust society, philosophers are useless. Philosophers are useless. Because philosophers are governed by knowledge. They want to govern society by knowledge. They do not want to govern society by money. Because if that is the case, you can never ever see what is the common good for all. Because you are always motivated by money. You are not enlightened by knowledge. You are not enlightened. Para sa iyo, pira-pira lang naman lahat. So if you do not allow yourself to be regulated and to be governed by knowledge in your guardianship, in becoming a ruler, then you can never ever see the bigger picture of things. You can never judge what is right from what is wrong, because your concern is for money alone, or for business alone. Money for the oligarchs. And so Plato's theory of education, therefore, would... Yes? Huh? Can a philosopher fix? Your question is like, which comes first? The egg or the chicken? Which comes first? The egg or the chicken? Can the philosophers fix? That is actually the dilemma of Plato. That is the dilemma of Plato. Because which should really the philosopher solve the problem, or in fact the philosophers are useless in an unjust society? That's the dilemma. You can find that in 473. 473, if you have the book. 473. And he said that unless a society is being governed by rulers, or unless political philosophy and politics and philosophy become identical, something like that. 473. There is no letter here, but it is at the last paragraph of the book of Alan. The last paragraph. And Socrates said, unless, I said, the philosophers rule as kings, or those now called kings and chiefs genuinely and adequately philosophize, and political power and philosophy coincide in the same place, while the many natures now making their way to either apart from the other are by necessity excluded. There is no rest from ills for the cities, my dear Plato, nor I think for humankind, nor will the regime we have now described in speech ever come forth from nature, in so far as possible, and see the light of the sun. This is what for so long was causing my hesitation to speak, seeing how very paradoxical it would be to say, For it is hard to see that in no other city would there be private or public happiness. So actually, that's the dilemma of Plato. It is something paradoxical. Should the philosophers give a solution to the unjust society? Which comes first? Should there exist philosophers and then they are going to solve the problem? Or there is already an unjust society that anybody or everybody who is not even a philosopher wanted to solve? Because in real life, there is only a society. It is because here Plato is describing in ideal terms. But in real terms, there is already an unjust society. And in an unjust society, are there philosophers there or not? Are there philosophers? Can philosophers thrive in an unjust society? Or are they also going to be corrupted? Because it is also being said in Plato, I already forgot where it is, that philosophers cannot be able to thrive, or their aptitude can never be discovered in an unjust society. Their aptitude can never be, because society would be able to corrupt them. The unjust society would be able to corrupt them. So your question actually is that which comes first? Is it the egg or the chicken? And Plato realized that question already. Because for him, society can corrupt, or a philosopher can never discover his own aptitude in an unjust society, because he shall be corrupted. But here, I think Plato is trying to make a distancing. It is because he is now trying to make an assessment or an evaluation coming from a perspective that is as if he is separate from the unjust society. As if he is separate from an unjust society. So is Plato a philosopher in an unjust society? Is he a lover of learning? Of course, there is something noble in him, to the extent that he can be able to see what is the ill of the city. What is the problem, or what is the sickness, in other words. There is something that he sees. A sickness. And it is the sickness that he wanted to address and provide a solution. And so he would now propose a theory of education so that everybody can be able to discover their own aptitude, and in that way they can be able to perform their function in the city that they want to hold. So for Plato, it is so important that the educational process has a certain kind of pedagogy. There is pedagogy. There are stages that you really want to follow. And for him, it is so important that education shall not be forced. Education shall not be forced, because forced studies does not hold anything in your soul. Does not hold anything in your soul. Forced studies does not hold anything in your soul. Just like for now. He is being forced to study, and so he doesn't learn anything. He is forced to study. You can find that actually in 536b. 536b. It's in book 6 already. 500 in book 7. 536. 536b to 537a. And it says, "Why not?" said Glaucon. "Because," Socrates said, "the free man ought not to learn in studies lavishly. Forced labors performed by the body don't make the body any worse. But no forced study abides in the soul." No forced study abides in the soul. It is because you find studying very attuned to your nature. You like to study. And so you are not forced to study because you discover that studying is your aptitude. Studying is your aptitude. And so Plato actually would propose that the children who are going to follow the track of educational pedagogy must begin with play. They must begin with play. It's because you have here so according to Plato, one must be able to study first UCK. That's the preparatory, UCK. Music. And then second, the gymnastics. That is to say, what is the preparatory? Gymnastics and UCK. It is not yet learning proper or education proper. The education proper would be philosophy. That's the education proper for Plato. And it is the last stage. When you reach already at the age of 30, that's the time that we are going to study philosophy. Not for you still, according to Platonic educational pedagogy. So you have here the music, the gymnastics, and then afterwards you are going to study astronomy, not yet astronomy, but geometry, and then number 4, you are going to study, it is not calculus, but actually you are going to study, it's because Plato does not give it a name, but it is he calls it some kind of a tri-dimensional geometry. Just like, for example, what do you call this? The area, it's because geometry only pertains to two-dimensional studies. For example, square, triangle, and you are going to know the angle, you are going to know the base, the height, the area, in other words, the area of, these are geometrical, what do you call this? Geometrical studies. You are going to know an angle, this is the hypotenuse, you have the adjacent angles and all of those things. These are very important when it comes to construction. It's because Plato wanted to inculcate this kind of studies not only for practical purposes, but actually for intellectual training, for intellectual discipline. That is why for him, he's much more closer to mathematics. That's why Plato also is considered to be a mathematician. And there is a rumor that says, or a heresy or a chismis that says that Aristotle founded the Lyceum because Plato did not give to him the chair of the academy. Perhaps one reason is that Plato is more inclined to mathematics, while Aristotle is much more inclined to natural sciences. The natural sciences, biology, That is why Aristotle is considered to be the father of biology. He's much. In other words, geometry, and then you have also calculus actually emerges because of the idea that you are going to calculate uneven objects. You are going to calculate the content of uneven objects, for example. For example, you have this kind of thing here. It is not square, it is not oblong, but there is an edge to this. And the calculus actually, as a discipline, emerged because builders wanted to know how much content it can fill. How much sun, for example, or how much water. It is because you cannot apply the formula of the formula of a rectangle in what we call this, in determining the area, for example. Because if you have a cube, for example, how are you going to know the volume? That's the idea. How are you going to know the volume of that kind of object, which is not square, which is not round? That's the discipline of calculus. But for Plato, perhaps he does not have any idea yet, because calculus is much recent, and calculus has been discovered independently by two geniuses in history. Who are the two geniuses in history who invented calculus? Two geniuses in history. The first one is a philosopher, and the other one is a physicist. I'm just joking. Who invented? Sir Isaac Newton and Gottfried Leibniz. Gottfried Leibniz is a philosopher, and Isaac Newton is a physicist. What I know about him, I haven't read anything about his book. But he is discussing topics in philosophy of religion, for example, because he is the one who invented the word theodicy, or he is the first one who used that word, theodicy. Question of God and the problem of evil. He is the first one who coined the term theodicy. But I haven't read anything about his works. Theodicy. But I hope if you want to make a thesis, for example, on Gottfried Leibniz, because as what I've heard, of course I've read something from. The problem with me is that I haven't read the original source, or what I have read are books that talk about Leibniz. Because for me, I can only speak authoritatively when I have been able to read the book. That should already be your maxim in life. I perform this. When you are a philosopher, and that is also one way of checking facts. As much as possible, if you want to check facts, you must be able to go back to the source, to the original writings. Ad fortes, that's the cry of the Renaissance philosophers or the Renaissance thinkers. Ad fortes, go back, read the original source. If the original source is very hard and boring to read, But if you are a philosopher who truly desire to know, because a philosopher, is it that you are? Because a philosopher always love knowledge. The philosopher always love knowledge. So if you really want to know something about that particular guy, about Godfrey Leibniz, then go to his books and read it. And read it. That is why I cannot talk very authoritatively about Leibniz. But what I know is that he is a monistic philosopher. That for him there is only one reality, the monads and others. Those things are okay. So we continue. So this is the theory of education for Plato, the pedagogy in other words. You have the geometry and then you have also the tridimensional geometry, I will call it. The tridimensional geometry. That is to say, it is geometry but then tridimensional because you now include also the cubes, for example, the tetrahedron, the octahedron. In other words, these are part of the study of the academy in Plato's school. For example, it's because here, how are you going to compute? This is very easy. If you are going to compute the volume of the cube, it's very easy because the formula is length times width times height. So length times width times height. So that's the volume. So if you have, for example, cone, this is part of the studies in academy. So if you have a cone, that's a triangle. But then since the cone has a circle, so how are we going to get the formula or the volume of this cone? That is part of the, so 1/2 base times, how you want to 1/2 base times height. But this is the triangle, I think. But the cone, I don't know. I'm not so much. I really forget the formula of getting the volume of the cone. But that's actually Plato's program. And so not everybody, because right from here, in the music and the gymnastic, if you are not at home already with learning, it is because you are not fond of schooling. You do not like to study, but then you love farming, you love carpentry, in other words, you love the physical work. And Plato did not consider them as something inferior thing to do. Because these are professions essential to the city. But what he is also after is that a philosopher king will also emerge through this educational pedagogy. Kasi nasasala yung tao. According to his likes and dislikes. Wala ka namang gusto talagang mag-aral ng math. Gusto kong pag-aaralin ng math. Ang gusto mong pag-aaralan anthropology. Gusto mong pag-aaralan ng anthropology. Bakit kayo kailangan magkakalculus ka pa? Something like that. It is because it is not what you like. But as much as possible, you know basic arithmetic, 1 plus 1 plus 2. It is because it is included. You know how to count. So here you have the geometry and also astronomy. Astronomy, and then it is only in the 5th part that you are going to study philosophy. It is when you are already 30 years old. It is only 30 years old that you are going to study philosophy. And it is very in consonant with the ladder of love. That is why I bring with me Plato's Symposium. Because what Plato said here in the Republic, you can actually also resonate very well in his elaboration of the ladder of love. Because it talks about love. So why you study music? It is because you love. Why you study gymnastics? It is because you love. Why you study geometry, the mathematics, the sciences? It is because you love. Why you study philosophy? It is because you love. That is why love for Plato is so essential. It is something that you want to do, coming from your own heart, because we love what is beautiful. We love always what is beautiful. We do not love what is ugly. We do not love what is ugly. We always love the beautiful. And as much as possible, we can be able to see the beauty. We can also be able to see the beauty of music. That is to say, the 9 muses. It is not only the singing, but actually poetry. You must be able to love poetry. You must be able to love epic poetry, the lyrical poetry. All of those poetries, the 9 muses. Yeah. Can you search that in the internet? The 9 muses. You have history, for example, history that's part of the music. The 9 muses in ancient Greece. Epic poetry, history, love poetry, music. So those are the 9 muses. So actually, these are the things that you are going to study first and foremost. And even dancing. Dancing actually is meant for, is a music. Dancing. It is because it is teaching you to be gracious. Hindi magaslaw yung kilos mo. As much as possible, there is graciousness when you are going to walk. You know. So, there is graciousness. Just, can you search the Putin walk? President Putin's walk. That's a walk of a gracious man, a leader. And it is, and many people, the netizens are intrigued because his left hand doesn't move. His left hand doesn't move. That is what you call the gracefulness of the walk of a leader. Very graceful. Hindi magaslaw. O hindi. It's because you are a guardian. And as much as possible, you must walk in such a manner that is dignified and noble. That your body, that through your body, the beauty of your soul is being manifested. The beauty of your soul is being manifested through your body. That there is gracefulness when you walk. There is elegance when you speak. That is why I like also his speech. That is why I posted there in my Facebook that I am already a fan of Putin. It's because in his speech, of course he's using the Russian language, but there is there is the subtitle, and Putin asked the crowd, just breathe for a while and answer this question: do you love Russia? That's a very profound question coming from my leader. And if you are there present, you should feel and you should the power of his words. Do you love the Philippines? But then if President Rodrigo Duterte would give the speech, many people would not be having an experience of a great experience, something like that, a heightened experience of their souls. It's because he has a very weak body. He does not have the strong body. In other words, the beauty of his soul is not being reflected through his body. But of course, President Duterte deserved to be congratulated also for the good things that he had done. But at least, I hope that someday we can be able to produce guardians of our city who are truly philosophers, lovers of knowledge, in other words, not lovers of money, but lovers of knowledge, that they can be able to judge what is the good for everyone, not only for the good of a particular group of people, but they can always decide and judge for what is the best for all. So Vladimir Putin walks gracefully, unlike President Duterte, who doesn't walk gracefully because he's very sickly. You cannot pass on your charisma to people. If that is your walk. Ano na presidente natin? Ang hina ng presidente natin. Ang hina ng presidente natin. Masakitin. Kasi masakitin. Sakitin yung presidente natin. Or maybe President Joseph Eira himself. Huwag niyo akong subukan. He is not also elegant when he gives speeches. You see, it was Plato, as much as possible, wanted to produce a philosopher king who is noble and dignitary. He has a noble soul which is being expressed through his body, through his gestures, through his mannerism. And at the same time, he knows how to judge what is the good for everyone. So it is in this educational pedagogy that we can also read in his ladder of love. And I would like to read it to you. We are going to read the symposium. After Republic, we are going to read the symposium, but I think it is in the last part. But as much as possible, I want you to recognize already that there is this connection between Plato's educational theory and Plato's elaboration of the ladder of love, in which he discusses in the symposium, and it is in this way. So the true So this is the introduction. Certainly, and why to beget? That is to say, why to produce? Why do we do something? Why do we construct? Why you construct something? Or why you construct a house? Why you construct a road? Why you construct a building? Why do we beget? Or why do we want to beget babies? Or why do we want to form a family? That's the question. Why do we form a family? Or why do we create buildings? Why we produce songs? Why we create novels? Why we write poetry? All of these things. Why do we beget? Certainly, and why to beget? Because begetting is by human standards something eternal and undying. To produce something is something eternal and undying. You produce something. It is because it is the product of your soul. Your action is an expression of your soul. It is an expression of your own immortality, because the soul is immortal. So as much as possible, everything that you do must be able to participate in the immortality of your soul. That is to say that it must endure. It must last. So the city that we build must also last. It must be able to participate in the eternity of our own soul, because our soul is immortal. So why do we beget babies? Or why do we form a family? It is because we want that our family also want to participate in the immortality of the soul. And so I have to love my family. I have to take care of my family. And as much as possible, I want that my children would also discover the immortality of their soul. And in that way, they can be able to continue the love that I have give to them. So if you are going to become fathers, I hope that you can already be inspired by Plato's philosophy. It's because an activity, begetting, producing, they are activities of your soul, which is something eternal, something immortal. So if we were right in describing love as the desire always to possess the good, so for Plato, to love is to possess the good. You love somebody, you have a girlfriend, because you want to possess the good. You always want to be with the good. Being with her just makes me happy. That is enough. I am already in good hands when I am with her. I am already in good hands. It is because I love her, and for that, I am already satisfied. My soul is already happy. So if we were right in describing love as the desire always to possess the good, then the inevitable conclusion is that we desire immortality as well as goodness. We desire immortality as well as goodness. On this argument, love must be desired for immortality as much as for beauty. So love is always the love of the beautiful. And we always aspire for the good because we want to be immortalized. We want to be immortalized because our soul is immortal. Our soul is eternal. And as much as possible, the things that we are doing must be able to participate in the immortality of our soul, that it must last through the ages. And so the cities that we build, as much as possible, it must last through the ages. And the church must be able to withstand in the second coming of Christ. In other words, it is completely related to, very, you can easily connect. Platonic, that is why for the church fathers, Platonic philosophy is very close to Christianity, very close to Christian faith. Very close. You can easily Christianize Plato. You can easily Christianize Plato. And it is very hard to Christianize Aristotle. But then, Aquinas was able to Christianize Aristotle and his philosophy. For Plato, it's very easy. And so, we continue with the ladder of love according to Plato. And he says, the true follower of this subject, that is to say of love, the true follower of love, if you are really a lover, if you are really a philosopher, because a philosopher is being governed by the love of knowledge. The true follower of this subject must begin as a young man with a pursuit of physical beauty. With a pursuit of physical beauty. In the first place, if his mentor advises him properly, he should be attracted physically to one individual. At this stage, his offspring are beautiful discussions and conversations. What kind of discussions do you have? Beautiful conversations. What conversations do you have? You don't have any intellectual discussions yet. So, you are not yet a follower of or a disciple of Plato philosophy because your discussions are still very shallow. Yes?
As for humans, is beauty subjective or objective?
Beauty, of course, beauty is something objective. There is something beautiful. As long, because beauty Whether you like it or not, there is always the objective part of beauty. Particularly when it is in consonance with reason, in consonance with truth. And truth is not something subjective. Truth is always beautiful. Because that's the truth. It can never be subjective. So in other words, there is that. But when it comes to our likings, for example, when it comes to our own personal idiosyncrasies, then there is also the subjective part of beauty. But for me, I would like to emphasize objective beauty, particularly those of reason. As much as possible, it has to be in consonance with reason and in consonance with truth. Because what is truthful is always beautiful. It's truthful. So next, we should realize the physical beauty of one body is akin that of any other body. And that if he's going to pursue beauty of appearance, it's the height of folly not to regard the beauty which is in all bodies as one and the same. So for Plato, in order for you to have a good body, you must cultivate first your mind. Because, as what he said, a good soul, by its own virtue, produces a beautiful body as it can be. Produces a good body, a good soul. So that's the idea of Plato. But the first ladder of love actually is the gymnastique. But in order for you to be able to love the body, you must be able to cultivate first your mind. You must be able to cultivate your mind. That is why it is a maxim for the Greeks that says, mens sano in corpore sano. Mens sano. Mens sano in corpore sano. What does it mean? Mens sano in corpore sano. A good mind in a healthy body. A good mind. Mens meaning mind. Mens mentis. That's the declension of it. Mens mentis. Mentis, mente, mente. So mente meaning mind. Mens sano in corpore, the corpus corporis, corpore. Mens sano in corpore sano. So a healthy mind and a healthy body is already 10:35, and we can't continue this reading. But anyway, next week we will not have a class. This coming Tuesday. It's because I want you to read something or no, just relax. It's because you have bombarded already with a lot of things. But anyway, the exam, of course, would be a one-day exam. A one-day exam, and it's an essay, and the deadline will always be 11:59 in the evening. So you still have ample time. And as much as possible, try to be short. As much as possible, 300 words is enough. But then you can always exceed. But as much as possible, 300 words, that's enough. 300 words. But exceed, you can exceed maybe 1 or 2 words or 3 words. But you can also exceed maybe 1,000 words. It's okay. It's because you are very inspired with the essay. But of course, it doesn't guarantee that you are going to have a good grade if your essay is long. Because if your essay is long, but then there is no point in it, so it's much better that you have a short one but very, very meaty. If you have a very meaty essay, so I would give that a good one. But as much as possible, yes.
It's about justice, also.
Yes, of course, it's about justice. It's very public because this is the last, and then it's because the program for me in these midterm grades, we are going to talk about the Republic, but then we haven't finished actually the Republic or the book 6. In book 7, I really want to discuss about the theory of education of Plato, particularly the allegory of the cave, because the allegory of the cave and the theory of the theory of the divided line, they are always connected with each other. They cannot be separated. You should always remember that. The theory of the divided line, that is his epistemology, and the theory of, and the allegory of the cave, which is his theory of education, expressed in a form of allegory. Expressed. They cannot be separated, always remember that. Because his epistemology, his understanding of knowledge is completely related on how he is going to educate the citizens of the city in order to produce the guardian, the appropriate guardian, the perfect guardian, or the rightful ruler, the rightful guardian of the city. But anyway, I want you to read those, to read those things. Actually, it's very easy to remember because at the last page, at the last part of book 6, that is the theory of the undivided, and the theory of the divided line. That's the theory of the divided line. And on the next page, in book 7, which is actually the beginning of book 7 also, the allegory of the cave. So the allegory, they always have to be connected to each other. Do not separate them when you are going to interpret these two allegories, this theory and the allegory. So anything? Huh? There are 2 sets of the exam. 4 questions, but then you only choose 2. You only choose 2. Why is it hard? Is it very hard? Only. So anything? So none. So let us all stand and let us end this prayer. End this class with a prayer by glorifying God. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever. Amen.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.